Hello and welcome to our webinar, Enterprise Blockchain 101, Top Considerations Before You Deploy. This webinar is presented by Kaleido, the Blockchain Business Cloud, the only full-stack blockchain software as a service platform for building and running cross-cloud hybrid enterprise ecosystems for the modern business network. My name is Andrew Pearson. I'm Kaleido's CMO, and I'll be your host today. This webinar includes a 45-minute presentation by our panel, followed by a 15-minute section of live Q&A. Our agenda is exciting, and while this webinar may have a 101 title, we'll actually be covering many of the essential aspects and considerations of blockchain for the enterprise, including some advanced topics. So we'll cover these as deep as we can in the short amount of time. We did conduct a poll of our audience, and just to let you know, the attendees on this webinar, when conducted live, had a wide range of familiarity with blockchain, though many were at the phase of their journey where they had at least done an enterprise blockchain pilot or proof of concept. You can also see here the learning goals. We allowed them to select multiple options, which many folks reported that just learning more about enterprise blockchain solutions, examples of how enterprises are using blockchain, plus the technical aspects of blockchain stood out as high priorities. So next I want to introduce our speakers. We're very fortunate today to have a panel of enterprise blockchain experts, all four Kaleido founders, and we're very fortunate to have them all together in the same room, as oftentimes they're out speaking with clients, partners, or on stage at any number of global business and blockchain events. So welcome y'all. Steve Cerveny is founder and CEO of Kaleido. Steve has over 15 years of experience in emerging technologies, building, launching, and growing enterprise products in a variety of business and technical roles. He's led the product team at IBM, spearheading the creation of over a dozen cloud services and launched the industry's first blockchain managed service. Welcome, Steve. Sophia Lopez is founder and COO of Kaleido. Sophia began working with blockchain in 2015, helping to shape the community and developing new commercial approaches for the enterprise market. She led IBM blockchain platform product portfolio and held various leadership positions with responsibility for multi-billion-dollar lines of business. Jim Zhang here is co-founder and head of protocol at Kaleido. Jim has 15 years of experience in building a diverse range of enterprise systems and is a contributor to a wide range of enterprise blockchain protocols. He's an active member of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance's technical spec work group and has contributed to the Quorum open source project codebase. Additionally, he's a co-contributor to the Hyperledger Fabric project and to Pantheon. And then finally, Peter Broadhurst is co-founder and head of engineering here at Kaleido. He has 15 years experience in software engineering, working at the intersection of enterprise middleware, cutting-edge cloud architecture, and mission-critical customer engagements. He's been the technical steward from inception to delivery of 3 enterprise-grade cloud services through multiple generations of cloud architecture and is uniquely qualified for blockchain as a service enterprise cloud delivery. So with that, Sophia is going to kick off the webinar and take us through the first part of our agenda, the rise of the ecosystem economy. Sophia, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. I thought it would be good to start with where we're seeing clients globally. We're working with a lot of the leaders across all the industries in the world who are looking at decentralized technologies. And as Andrew mentioned, we're really seeing something that we're calling the rise of the ecosystem economy. These ecosystems can cross regional and industry borders. You see value created in multiple directions, not just one-directional value chains. And the interactions really become more complex, collaborative relationships, where you see people who oftentimes may even be competitors coming together around solving a particular type of pain point in business processes where there's shared data or other shared components today that are pretty inefficient, and they've been looking to tackle for decades, but didn't really have the technologies to do this prior to today. One interesting thing in this new ecosystem economy is that you see that the business networks are what hold the repeatable value. So you're transitioning for a company looking at the one product that they're launching in the marketplace, and that's sort of their winning bet. It's really how are they forming these business networks, with whom are they forming, and what are the business use cases they can roll out over time that's providing the repeatable value. And they see that their individual success is really going to be dependent and is dependent on the health of these ecosystems that they're forming. Currently, some of the problems they're trying to really tackle are that these existing B2B value chains are in a tech stack that's had trouble evolving as companies look to digitally transform, and they're burdened with trillions in economic efficiencies. These range across just time, visibility, risk, inefficiency, fraud, and disputes. And you see consultants have estimated the amount of the value of moving to these ecosystem economies in the trillions, and specifically 60 trillion by 2025. So there's really a lot at stake for the companies who figure out these new business models, are able to digitally transform, adopt the right sort of layers of technologies to do that, to power their success. And if you think about where the industry is today and where they might be 5-10 years from now, we're going to see radical transformation of sort of the future of how we work and these business processes. Primarily, if you look at the pain points, you're really looking at today these back office systems of record where the sources of truth resides, or the system of record resides, have not moved since the dawn of computing. So some of these systems, when we're working with clients, are literally 30, 40 years old, and they've finally gotten to the point where you're seeing payment rails, these supply chain rails, these messaging, commerce technologies. We're due for a transformation, and at the same time, you see these evolving ways businesses work together. It all came together to really make it the perfect moment in time to adopt decentralized technologies and enterprise blockchain. They did see that patchwork of P2P connections led to a lot of issues like massive duplication, inefficiency, and lack of scalability. So you can see all the benefits of now moving to these new technology platforms as people digitize, standardize, really the new transparency and trust models, which we'll talk about a little bit more, how blockchain enables those. As these companies are coming together into these modern business networks, there are new sets of challenges that they're facing. They're moving from a dynamic where, today, if they add an application in their data center, it's maybe number 1001 that they're adding, and their IT staff is running and managing that. May take a year to launch that. You see these networks coming together, and for the first time, they're running into something we call shared IT, because now they have one view of the shared data, which is the ledger, one view of the application logic and the smart contracts. Now something as simple as onboarding a new member to the network can become challenging. They're looking at the policies, the governance, basically a lot of the tools and workflow needed for these modern business networks and this new ecosystem economy just hadn't been built yet. And as you see, from a blockchain perspective, I'm in the enterprise place applying those technologies. There's different levels of permissioning and access control, ownership of workloads, data residency requirements that these enterprises are bringing to the projects. It's interesting to see how prevalent this trend is. So Deloitte surveyed executives globally, and they've been doing this every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and the number's been steadily increasing. So their most recent survey, which was announced this May, says 92 of execs are either belong to a consortium or plan on joining one in the next 12 months. We've worked with many globally across industries. One interesting one we like to talk about is Congo. They're in an example of a trade finance network, but specifically in the oil commodity space. They actually incorporated in August, and we really do see it's a best practice to help power these new type of business networks, just setting up a separate entity where you have the major stakeholders come together. And instead of having one foot in your company and one foot in this new blockchain project, you all in, and you have this separate entity that you have joint ownership of. So they're coming to the table as equals to be invested in driving this project. So they did that in August of last year, and in December, 4 months later, we're already in production with their first use case, which was letter of credit, very, very high value letter of credit in this particular industry. And we're able to rapidly follow that up with KYC, receivables discounting, and other use cases. So very much following the pattern that we talked about earlier. And if you look at the names, the third of the top 20 banks in the world, the oil majors, so you really see significant players moving to these new models. If you look at the problems they were tackling, was very much moving from paper-based type processes, phone calls, faxes, to digitizing, sort of going all the way, leapfrogging to digital transformation on powered by decentralized technologies. If you look at their pain points, was hundreds of copies of documents spread over dozens of intermediaries, and coming out of that on the other end, they've seen 30 to 40% increase in cash flows, 100 times faster in certain areas of the processes, and lots of benefits across just decreasing errors and fraud. So certainly in their network, they have the larger players who are these the major stakeholders, and then a long tail of corporates who are part of the business relationships they have today, and are going to be growing and joining this network over time. And that's, again, it's a common pattern. A lot of these networks, it's really taking the values in those business relationships and then moving those onto a blockchain. Another pattern we see, this one was moving from paper-based processes, but as I mentioned earlier, we do see a lot of clients who are on decades-old sort of messaging systems and payment systems on sort of older heritage computer sort of server situations, and just moving those systems as part of a digital transformation effort into these new business networks. Sampling of different types of areas where we see a lot of disruption, even in the early days of enterprise blockchain, has been, I would say, real-time transactions was one in the financial services space, especially looking at what you can do around automated execution, provenance and tracking. So supply chain type use cases are really something that horizontally, cross industries can be applicable. And tokenization has come more to the forefront in enterprise context in recent years, as people realize, they are digitizing assets, and then now there's a lot more you could do for fractionalizing the ownership of that and trading and settlement with multiple parties using this tokenization construct. In terms of different business models, if you look across all industries, we've seen a lot of really interesting examples of different types of data exchanges, of ways of removing frictions. Sometimes there's still replicating relationships where there's more of a clearinghouse type entity, and sometimes completely going to different models. And there's different ways to bring in technology elements of that, and as you can see, the governance that goes with that as well. But we're really seeing a lot of creative thought. There's just as a variance. There's the evolution that you can enable with these new technologies, as well as the revolution, which is the sort of the business model innovation. And I think the last comment I'll make here on the intro is just spending a little more time on the tokenization and the emergence that I mentioned earlier. Some of the clients who are working with us have done some really interesting things, and some more, I guess, traditional industries. But if you look at, digital marketing, how do you approach sort of today's consumers who are much more living in the digital world. So something as common as just promoting a movie. You know, in the past, you'd go, you get the movie poster, or you go to Burger King, you get the Happy Meal, or McDonald's, and you get the toy. You know, today's younger consumers and, you know, looking for different things to collect. So one of the companies, Green Fence, who runs on our platform, they've done a lot to innovate in the digital collectible space, working with Sony and Fox and with movie releases like Goosebumps and Deadpool to just to provide the digital collectibles to drive more interest around those campaigns. And they've also used tokens in the ad tech space. There's a tremendous amount of fraud and waste in ad tech, if it was digital couponing. And they've done campaigns using non-fungible tokens with players such as T-Mobile. T-Mobile has T-Mobile Tuesdays, where they provide coupons, mobile coupons to their users, working with Kroger to just drop the coupons there in their digital wallets. And they've seen 65% marketing engagement rates, which are just, I think, normally the single-digit % range. So, and that was a reflection of how much more they were able to put in consumers' pockets with these coupons, removing some of that waste and passing that value on to the end users.
Great. Well, thanks, Sophia. That's fantastic. So we're going to turn it over to Jim here, who's going to walk us through some of the foundational blockchain concepts, and then bring Peter and Steve into the mix.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Sophia. So let's look at the bits and bytes that make blockchain work and why the world needs blockchain. So some unique aspect of blockchain is it's really trust and transparency that makes people trust the data. So whatever is recorded on the chain, people can feel safe that nobody can attack them and change them. And because of that property, digital assets that are reflected on the chain that represents real-world values can be traded with confidence. And because of the immutability aspect of the design, and which is achieved through decentralized consensus, and when business logic is involved, in executing transactions, smart contracts can make things really easy for developers. So all of this is designed around a decentralized design so that everybody has control, but nobody is in control. So this makes it work so that the participants in the blockchain system can feel safe that their participation is contributing to the end result, which is data immutability. And governance is a very interesting aspect of blockchain as well. Instead of trusting a central party to look over the data and ensure they are safe, everybody contributes to a decentralized governance. And on the enterprise space, there's some particular unique concerns. So privacy and permissioning is obviously very high on the list. Security, scalability, performance, and finally data control, so that you have control of your data while you're able to share with the rest of the network. It's all very important to enterprise use cases. Next one. So just very quickly to look at like the world's IT systems from the left to right. The most kind of system we've seen day in, day out that are powering the Facebooks, the Ubers is centralized systems where we trust, you know, the likes of Uber and Facebook to do the right thing, to be the steward of the data that we put into the system. Distributed is a peer-to-peer kind of system. Enterprise have seen these systems in the likes of distributed systems and databases. And decentralized system is where blockchain is. It's a kind of new world with new design, where control is decentralized among parties that don't have a common interest. So collusion among parties is very low. Next. Okay. So you may ask, okay, so I've seen the system records multiple copies of a transaction and use consensus algorithms to make sure they're identical with each other. I think I've seen that. It's called distributed database. So how is blockchain different? Blockchain is really different because it's the core thesis of blockchain is data immutability. Whereas in a distributed database, just like any traditional database, every record is independent. In the blockchain, every single record is chained into this large hash chain of blocks, where if you try to make a change in any record, it's going to break the long hash chain, and the evidence of tampering will be really easy to detect. Now, in the next slide, we'll see a little bit details of how this is working under the cover. So on the bottom of this Merkle tree structure, let's use an example of 4 transactions, TX 1, 2, 3, 4. So we take a Merkle tree and we arrive at a single hash that represents all 4 transactions content, which means if you try to modify any of the transactions, the hash on the root will change. So now we put this root into the block as block header, and then we have a block hash. Block hash has the Merkle tree root, which represents the transactions. It also takes into account a few other factors. So in the end, we have a root hash that represents the block itself, and then we chain them together. So let's say, as an attacker, I like to change transaction 3 into a 3 prime. What you have to do if you want to leverage a successful attack, you would have to change 3 to 3 prime, and then recalculate the Merkle tree root, and then recalculate the hash for that block. And then for all the blocks that are following this block, you have to recalculate all the hashes until the head of the chain, which means the cost of the attack is very, very high compared to traditional databases. So in the enterprise blockchain space, the 3 leading protocols is Hyperledger Fabric, Ethereum Enterprise versions, and Corda. So all 3 are really strong protocols that cater to different kinds of use cases. Ethereum and Fabric tend to be more general purpose. They get to apply to any industries, really. Corda is more designed for peer-to-peer kind of transactions that we tend to see in the financial systems. All 3 are really good choices for implementing enterprise level use cases. Ethereum, among the 3, tend to have the largest community and have run in the world for the longest period of time. Because blockchain is so complex, it utilizes very complex cryptography and distributed systems. You want to make sure the code that's running on the node has been battle hardened, has been peer reviewed by the best computer scientists in the world. So you rely on the open source community to achieve that. And among the 3 protocols, Ethereum is enjoying a huge community of innovators and blockchain developers and researchers alike from all over the world.
Jim, a question just came in that may be relevant for this slide. Do Ethereum Enterprise versions include Quorum?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Ethereum Enterprise really represents a collection of implementations. So unlike Fabric, unlike Corda, which is a single code base, Ethereum has more than 5 code bases, and they're all independently developed. So a computer scientist should know that the more independent implementations you have in the stack, the less opportunity that you get attacked. So that's one advantage with Ethereum. Finally, so how does all this make sense in the real world when enterprises want to use blockchain to solve their real problems? So with the Union Bank or Atado, both are fully decentralized systems where you have citizens of the Philippines and the surrounding islands, and people that are in the supply chain for tuna. The trust in the system is such that you can trust the math and you can trust the computer scientists, and you don't have to trust any single operator of the node to do the right thing, because because of the decentralized design of the system, no one can modify your data. So with that, we're going to look at the business side of blockchain and how that solves real problems.
Thanks, Jim. So what's really exciting about blockchain is it means that a set of businesses, a set of separate entities can now have this shared, immutable ledger of data. It's a shared ledger that anything that's written to it can never be changed, and it's this ledger that everything that's written to it has to be, through this consensus algorithm, through the blockchain, made immutable through lots of coordination and technology, etc. And that's different to any centralized database technology. It's a kernel of technology that changes the whole solution, but it isn't in itself the whole solution. A business network doesn't get together and say, hey, look, let's build a blockchain. A business network gets together and says, hey, let's make our business process 100 times faster than it was. Let's make ourselves more efficient. Let's make our service better to our consumers. Let's change the way that we do business together. And as part of that, we're going to share a little bit of data. We're probably in co-opetition with each other. We're probably going to be competing as well as collaborating as part of this solution. And for that reason, there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed to build the overall solution that isn't simply writing every single piece of data that you might have to a shared ledger. Our customers have told us in that journey that we've been through with many of our customers through the POC and pilot phases really into production, the blockchain piece, that critical piece of technology, is actually only 5 to 10% of the overall solution itself. The solution stack for these modern enterprise business networks is much thicker than that. So we'll move on to the next slide. Actually, it looks a lot like the enterprise development stack that we're all familiar with from every enterprise project that's been built for the last number of decades. But every piece of it is made slightly different by the fact that it's built around this kernel, this beating heart of blockchain. You have a data layer, just like you would in any enterprise solution, but now that data layer has some small piece of data that is shared. The on-chain data maintained through those smart contracts, address books, identity, proofs, tokens, these core constructs that you actually want to put on the chain and share forever for all time with everybody. This is a business network, so actually most of the data is private and individual to those organizations and is off-chain. And any solution that you build needs to pay as much attention to that private, independently maintained data, regulatory concerns around that data, the size of the data, how it's transferred, how it's automated, and how it's audited, as much as it does that small amount of data that's going to be on the chain. So that's the data layer, all maintained through or pinned to that blockchain network, so that data that is on-chain can obviously be referenced in on-chain logic, and data that's off-chain can be referenced anonymously with hashes that tie the on-chain logic to that off-chain data, whether that's shared with everybody through a peer-to-peer sharing system, or whether that's individually maintained by each private entity. Of course, blockchain at its core is about transactions. It's about end-to-end business transactions, and at the technical layer, it's about lots of individual transactions happening on the chain. The technology is also incredibly different at a practical level from a centralized database. Getting transactions onto the chain, getting events off of the chain is not a trivial exercise. And those thousands of lines of code have been built and many times over, but they are different to the centralized database space. And you need those technologies to be consumable for you to actually build the project on top of. Of course, this new world in the middleware layers, we need to connect with all of the existing IT investments that you have. And this isn't just about one organization. This is about every participant in the business network joining the shared tier of on-chain data and off-chain coordinated transactions with their own private systems of record. So this middleware tier is actually a critical piece of the overall blockchain-centered solution. And then you, of course, are going to be building rich, great user experiences and APIs in applications. And those applications need to be built. Maybe they're going to be built by a centralized entity formed from the business network. Maybe they're going to be built in collaborative open source, but they are going to be built. And they're going to be built in a different way to previous centralized applications. In fact, there's even a term for this, the DApp, the decentralized application. And where you're used to database records and documents, now we talk about core coding constructs of tokens and assets that are being tracked on the chain. And here's where you need to get to privacy and anonymity and how many transactions you share with everybody on the network or individually. Leading edge concepts like zero knowledge proofs and other technologies that allow you to build your applications in a fundamentally different way. Of course, the challenge isn't just about the technology stack itself. It's actually about the business network. So yes, we're going to be building a whole new solution that's going to join together, that provide the plumbing for the business network, but we're also going to build it in a different way, and we're going to build it to solve problems in a different way. Move on one more slide, Andrew. The way that these networks form and the technology gets built is not the same as one central IT organization of one enterprise making all the decisions. It's actually about a set of IT organizations collaborating to build a solution. And that, for me, I think is maybe the thing that's most different, more than the technology, about building these solutions to any enterprise IT project that I've been involved with in my career. And things like flexibility of choice, hybrid deployment models, choice of cloud become critical at this stage of, as you evolve from just a technology proof to actually building a business network, to join together these businesses and actually solve some of those use cases. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Steve to talk about some of the actual challenges that we've seen business networks overcome and some of the solutions that exist to actually make it real.
Thanks, Peter. So obviously there's not one right approach, and there's no silver bullet. We live in the real world where there are many different types of business collaborations. There are many different types of data and transactions that flow around to make the world economy work. However, we're now far enough along into our overall blockchain journey to see certain patterns starting to emerge, and we've now seen enough experiments go through with blockchain groups to know some best practices for what can help make these sort of intrinsic human problems, right? Because there are different organizations that need to come together. Unfortunately, not every problem is a technology problem where we can just sit down as engineers and try to solve it. There are many other sorts of human problems that get involved. So here are some tips that we've observed working hand in hand with some of the leading blockchain consortia out there in the world. One is to understand that there are different types of models of how you structure the consortia. You can set up a new legal entity and pay dues into that entity and fund and empower that entity. For example, you can go in a much more flat route where all the different participants maintain very much equal set of control over the network, but then you need to be very careful in structuring and dividing up responsibilities in that context. So there are, and those are just a couple examples. There are many different types or there are several different types of ways to organize a consortium. The other thing is just to understand who the founding members are. When you look into the technology of the blockchain, that there are key members that need to take on additional responsibility in ensuring the integrity of the network, that it continues to work. And that gets into the consensus algorithms that Jim was talking about earlier. But typically what we see as these business groups form is there are a core set of members. We sometimes call them validators in the blockchain lingo, that ensure that the network always has a critical mass of participation and activity to keep functioning. And those members take on those technical responsibilities, but they also tend to be quite involved in kind of steering the overall organization. And then, of course, because we're talking about ecosystems, back to what Sophia was talking about, there tends to be a long tail of participation in these networks. And so ensuring that your consortium can scale and can grow, and planning ahead for that, it tends to be a common sort of bottleneck that we see, where you get into get through your POC and into a pilot phase with a small number of members, but perhaps haven't really thought ahead to what it's going to mean to scale and grow. So planning for that early, ensuring that the solution and the technology choices and the partners that you're working with can help you really get to the ultimate bottom line business network, which can often be kind of several phases down the road. So there's a quick snapshot of a few tips that we've seen. I want to spend the last couple minutes before we open up to question and answer to just give you a brief snapshot of the Kaleido platform itself. I know that many of you had indicated that you are curious about what sort of solutions are out there. As the founders of this platform and veterans in the enterprise blockchain space, we really looked back at the programming stack that Peter was just talking about, that it takes to get the whole solution alive. And we wanted to set out to build the enterprise easy button for that stack. Thinking about business networks as a whole, not just about specific blockchain technologies, but about how all those things need to come together, and really, and that includes, building the broadest platform possible, offering the flexibility and choice that Peter was talking about, but doing it enterprise grade in the DNA of the platform. So 24/7, support, an enterprise level SLA, and all the sort of things that enterprises really need to rely on in order to put a solution into production. I'm going to walk you quickly through a few key highlights. One is just how we built the platform with a composable set of services that are fully API enabled. So as you look at your particular solution, and we've seen some questions come in, for example, around how do we do privacy? Well, the reality is there are multiple different approaches that you may choose to implement privacy in your overall solution. As Kaleido, our philosophy was not to pick any one right way to force it. But what we've done is we've built a catalog of different technologies that are all pre-integrated and work together out of the box. So you can choose and experiment and learn some of these new emerging technologies, and you can marry those up with some of the existing technologies that Peter was talking about, like messaging and file transfer and so on, that are also our core building blocks for your solution. And it's our goal to eliminate as much of the custom code and kind of heavy lifting of the plumbing of your solution as we can do, and really give you that enterprise easy button to get you moving faster. So in addition to the Kaleido marketplace, we've also gone multi-cloud. So we sometimes joke that there's the 20 bank problem, and that is when you get those core members together to jumpstart this new modern business network, and you all sit down in a room together, it's hard to get everyone to agree on any one choice. So we've gone cross-cloud. We have partnerships with both AWS and Azure. We offer regions around the world for where you can set up your network, and you're in the driver's seat. You can whitelist what regions and clouds that you want the network to be able to expand in, And we've even announced an early program to go hybrid as well. So for some of the members that, and for particular different sectors, you may want some of those members to run on premise as well. So Kaleido has uniquely launched a feature in the marketplace that we call the private stack. And that allows you to take Kaleido software and run it as a node anywhere you choose and still plug into the rest of the network. Sophia talked about tokenization. We really see this emerging and coming of age in 2019. This is one of the big trends that we talk about in the enterprise blockchain space. Tokens, maybe have a bit of a stigma attached to them, or certainly a strong connotation to Bitcoin and sort of public networks. But the reality is that tokens represent digital assets. And in a shared blockchain network, it's a really powerful construct to be able to have a known shared state for that asset. And it makes it orders of magnitude easier to collaborate on the assets that you are already collaborating on across your business network. So we think of tokens as kind of the killer use case for enterprise blockchain use cases, and we see them really being embedded across the board increasingly in the projects that we're collaborating with you on. And lastly, we felt like in setting out to build Kaleido that sort of the old world tenancy models and operating models and DevOps procedures just don't work in a decentralized network. So we've rebuilt and reimagined some of that stack from the ground up. We enable you, as you set up your network, to create your own governance. We give you flexible policies that you can configure, and then you can invite other members and choose how those policies are passed on and how the network should operate and function. And so that's just kind of there, and it's native. It's a new way of doing, we call it shared IT or DevOps across your diverse network, just built in and native to Kaleido. We got a question earlier about production. I think it's important to emphasize that the leaders in this space are pushing ahead, while many teams, and we talk to innovation labs and different IT teams all the time, and it's great. Everyone's on their own journey of learning and experimenting and doing proofs of concept, but really the leaders are pushing ahead. The technology is there, it's mature enough. There are vendors like Kaleido who have been supporting production networks for some time now. The technology is really maturing. There are those learnings now from the leading blockchain groups and consortiums out there, and there's a lot of help on the business side as well. And so now is really the time to push forward with your projects. And we invite you to set up a free account on Kaleido today if you want to learn more and get some firsthand experience. You can always reach us. You can find us on all the social places, and also reach us directly at info@kaleido.io or connect on the website.
Great. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Steve, Sophia, Peter, and Jim. I think we've done our job and ended at 11:45, but we do have some questions and a couple that we've answered online, but there's a few more that may be really helpful for the whole audience to hear. So let's just dig in. This one question about kind of when it's, are there instances that we've encountered when maybe blockchain is not the right solution? So what is blockchain good for? What is blockchain not good for? Any examples that we've steered customers for traditional solutions?
So really, the do I need a blockchain question is a great one. It's really important actually to ask yourself in your project, could this be done with a centralized database? What is it that makes it actually worth the investment to collaborate on this solution in the way that blockchain forces you to do that collaboration? And really, the key is where you want multiple members to be able to independently verify the history of something. and that no one member is so trusted that they can have full control to go and change and modify that history in the past. And if that isn't necessarily true for your solution, well, a fast, simple, centrally maintained database that doesn't need to form consensus, doesn't need to be protected against hacking, etc., from multiple members maintaining it, is going to be a simpler, more effective solution to build. So if you have one trusted entity that can completely just run a completely centralized database, then potentially blockchain isn't for you. If, however, you want shared equal participation between peers, then chances are blockchain is going to be a completely different way to approach the problem that hasn't been available for you in the past, and could allow you to start cooperating with other organizations in the way that simply the technology didn't before. To feel like equals, to not feel like there's one king or queen at the center of the universe of your ecosystem, that you have a set of custodians that make the whole ecosystem feel safe, that allow that long tail of thousands of participants to join, feeling like they're not just becoming beholden to one entity. And if they get large enough, they can become one of the custodians themselves as well.
We've got some questions about recovery and auditing. So just curious, what are recovery options if a blockchain, quote unquote, goes down? And then how do auditors audit? I know, Jimmy, you mentioned that briefly, but any more insights?
Sure. So for recovery of a blockchain itself is designed for any type of attacks. And when one node goes down, the rest of the nodes will pick up the slack. So that's a built-in recovery mechanism. So as long as you have one or two remaining nodes still in the network, you still have the entire ledger. And when the crash nodes are brought back online, they get replicated automatically. So that's built into the system. And of course, if there is a danger of all the nodes to somehow disappear, you can make backups of the data, and you can create new nodes, and then they pick up where they left off.
And on the Kaleido platform, if you're thinking it by extension, what about my specific node if that goes down? That's where a platform or a solution like Kaleido has that value built into the box. Every node that you create on Kaleido, it intrinsically is highly available and has disaster recovery built into it. So we've done some of the hard and complicated engineering to ensure that your node is very durable. And we've created the plug points for you to be able to easily take snapshot backups of your data. So even if, from a business continuity perspective, even if Kaleido as a company would go away, your network would still carry on because you have a procedure for how to migrate off. And we think that's just responsible a business for the sort of enterprises that we serve.
And this is a question about enterprise or Ethereum. So what Ethereum EA clients do we support? Parity, Geth, Pantheon, and also related to that consensus mechanism.
Yeah. So out of the box, Kaleido supports Geth and Quorum and Pantheon. So Geth is the biggest deployment in mainnet. Quorum is the longest running enterprise version of blockchain in the Ethereum lineage, and Pantheon is a brand new client that's developed by consensus. As far as choices of consensus, we support Raft, IBFT, and POA, so that spans a range of instant finality and very fast block times versus very efficient consensus algorithms.
And Steve, can you comment further on what exactly we mean by a borderless blockchain and how that works?
Yeah, so if you think about business networks, your group is very diverse. So we wanted to create a platform that was as broad as possible. So a lot of times what's happening with these next generational systems is the current generation is kind of implemented in the old world on-prem sort of model where, as Sophia mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, things are quite siloed. You know, you have that lack of transparency as you look, you know, especially multiple layers down the business network. So in reimagining that and moving that onto a more modern business network or a next generation technology platform, you still want to maintain as much diversity as possible. I think there's a practical side of that, which is, you know, different companies have created relationships with different cloud vendors, and they may have strategic preference about where to put their workloads going forward. And it's really hard to get everyone to agree. So what we've done with Kaleido is we've created partnerships with multiple cloud vendors, and we allow it just through a single click of the button, your blockchain network, your business network to grow and expand. So we've kind of call that borderless blockchain, and then adding on to that the ability to take a node and self-run it via the Kaleido private stack, really anywhere on any cloud vendor or in any data center you want or private cloud, giving you that power and flexibility really allows you to create a borderless chain.
Here's a question about kind of IT managers' roles in consortiums. So how does Kaleido address the concerns of IT managers participating in a consortium network, given the implicit collaboration model from development to production support?
So I go ahead with that one. So actually, this is that 20 bank problem that Steve talked about earlier of I have my regulatory concerns, I have my IT security concerns, I have my chosen favorite technologies, and I have my data center. That's going to be the starting point for anybody joining a business network like this from an enterprise background. The reality is that we've seen so many projects stall when they've just said, that's fine, everybody just go and do your own thing. I'm sure we'll all manage to build stuff that connects together. We open enough firewall ports, everything's just gonna work. We've seen a lot of networks stalling with that approach. Actually, just enough consistency, just enough stewardship from either a board, a panel, or a set of working groups, or as Steve was mentioning earlier, actually a business entity that's separate to the individual IT organizations is critical in order to actually allow things to progress fast enough to actually solve the problems. And yes, there's going to be a little bit of uncomfort going forwards. There's also a huge business value attainable here. And we've seen banks work through Christmas to get into production, right? We've seen that kind of commitment to achieving the solution because of the business value. And yes, there's going to be some uncomfort there, but actually with just enough consistency, you can get through that and make real velocity gains to a business value that's worth the effort.
And can we talk a little bit about how Kaleido adheres to data privacy standards, for example, GDPR, and how that relates to the blockchain projects?
Yeah, so great question. And I'll talk about compliance a little more generally first. So, you know, we are working with some of the biggest organizations in the world, you know, many of which have their own industry-specific regulations. They exist in specific jurisdictions. So we take compliance quite seriously. We've been on a compliance journey for almost a year now. There is a logical kind of progression to how compliance standards have built on top of one another over the years. And so that's why we were really excited to announce a couple months ago that Kaleido is the first platform in the blockchain space that's achieved ISO compliance. And that was a lot of work. It was foundational, and it's going to allow us to build additional compliance levels on top of that. Now we built specifically for GDPR, and that's ISO 27000 in that family, by the way. For GDPR, we built with that in mind from the beginning. If you look at the sort of core architecture of Kaleido, even when you create your account, you need to select a region in order to do that. So we've done the sort of hard foundational cloud engineering to ensure that you're in full control of where all of your data is at any point in time. And that's all the way down to literally the email address on your ID in your Kaleido account. And along the way, we've done many things, and we've built many capabilities onto the platform in order to set us up for full GDPR compliance. But there is a progression to how these things are done. And the great news is with Kaleido that we are not on step one, we are multiple steps down the journey. And so expect for us to continue to add additional compliance. There are others in addition to GDPR, like SOC 2, that are very important for companies around the world. And so we are kind of customer driven from a demand perspective and how we prioritize. And then further beyond those sort of foundational ones that apply to everyone, looking into industry specific things like HIPAA in the healthcare industry, for example. So we have a full roadmap of those. We're happy under NDA if you have specific questions to get into a lot more detail about our plans and our achievements so far.
And we're coming up on the hour, so I think we'll just answer one more question live. Sophia, maybe you can assist with this. It's just about blockchain use cases. This participant asked, are blockchain use cases mainly for supply chains, or are there some other great examples that we can point to?
Yeah, I'm glad they asked that to clarify. I know we did talk about supply chains during the presentation. Supply chain is one example of a use case that is more of a horizontal one that cuts across industries. I'd say the tokenization capabilities we talked about as well are capabilities you'll see across industries. But certainly in all of the industry verticals, we've seen very active exploration of blockchain in the last 4 or 5 years in the enterprise space. And now clients pushing into production across financial services, obviously is a big one, but healthcare, life sciences, retail, media and entertainment. Really, every single industry you could look at and find some examples of blockchain in terms of the vertical use cases. And then again, there's the horizontal applications that will cut across.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate everybody's time. We'll be putting this recording together and sending you a link along with some other helpful resources to your email. Again, we're Kaleido, the Blockchain Business Cloud. We're really pleased that you've spent the last hour with us. We're happy to follow up with any specific questions you have. You're welcome to reach out by email or through the website. Again, we're www.kaleido.io. Please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for instant updates about what we're doing. And we really look forward to assisting you with your enterprise blockchain exploration and production projects.